We often hear how important vulnerability is. To our relationships. It's the key to deepening and strengthening them, right? But there's vulnerability, and then there's oversharing. And a fear of oversharing may be holding you back from being vulnerable. Therapist Kristin Hodson is here to explain the difference. It's great to see you.
Hi.
We were just chatting during the commercial break. This is one of those things that you sometimes feel, but I'm so grateful that you're going to articulate and define this for us today.
Well, I learned so much even myself that because it is something you feel, but there's not necessarily actual tools to be like, how do I apply this?
Right, so vulnerability, let's start there. How would you define that?
Vulnerability is this mutual trust building experience where you're sharing over time and you're looking at the circumstances and the relationships and you're building that. You're continuing to share parts of yourself to be known and to know. Oversharing tends to be very one-sided. The circumstances aren't necessarily appropriate and the relationships aren't built to support the large amount of information or the details that are given.
Can we give some examples of both?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this and I was thinking about the everyday neighborhood, and I live in a neighborhood where people get out and they're walking every single morning together. I'm also in a neighborhood where people are driving by and honking and waving. We just got done with a holiday, and so you may have a common question of how was your holiday weekend? The people that are walking every day may share like, oh yeah, this happened and this uncle, and you're sharing and you're listening and you're deepening your relationship, and there may be some vulnerability as you're sharing more of yourself. The honking and waving, someone may say, how was your holiday weekend? And you decide to share all the details about your uncle as well. And they're like, I just wanted to say hi, because it's not the right circumstance and you don't have that relationship built. And that's where you can lay in bed and be like, why?
Why did I say that?
Why?
Yeah. So what surprises me about this, as I'm kind of processing and listening at the same time, is it kind of speaks more about, it's more about the relationship. Than it is even the content or what's being said. I mean, there's some of that.
That's right. Yeah, I would say relationship and context. So that we can have someone that we know and we connect with regularly, but in a different context, it's not the time to share all the things. So I think about going to a party and you see someone that you're like, I love seeing you. I want to connect. That environment may not be what can support the deepening. And so in that moment, to lean into vulnerability, you know you want to connect, but you say, I love seeing you. Would you want to get together and go for a walk or go grab a bite to eat? So it's not so much what you say, it's can the relationship support, and is the context, is the timing right to share?
You've also used the word build a couple of times, and that kind of conveys to me a slow burn, as in there's a progression here.
There's a progression. I think of it a lot like a house, of building from the outside in. And I will speak to something about the inside, but we want to get the foundation and we start to put up the framing. We're not going to decorate a lot, an empty lot. We're going to build the structure so that as we add to it, it can support it.
You say another key to vulnerability is self-worth. What do you mean by that?
Yes. So oftentimes when we're doing vulnerability, we are looking to connect, but we are not necessarily needing to be totally validated. When we recognize our self-worth, we recognize our story is worth sharing, what we have to say matters, and so we're able to show up in that way. So when we are leaning into vulnerability, we are also doing the work of self-worth and that we matter.
Not looking for validation in our comments or for someone to fluff or build us up.
That's right.
That's really wise. You want us to embrace perfection. In pursuit of vulnerability, we embrace perfection.
Imperfection.
Imperfection.
I want us to embrace imperfection because the pursuit of vulnerability is vulnerable. And it is a very imperfect process. Sometimes we may overshare, and that's vulnerable. And that's our cue not to hold back, but to be like, oh, maybe it was not the right timing, and that's okay. As I'm leaning into vulnerability, it's going to be imperfect. And what I'm going to share may expose parts of myself that aren't put together. That's vulnerable. But when we embrace that imperfection, we step into vulnerability.
I almost feel like we've gotten too good at that in some cases, the imperfection. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Social media has peeled back the curtain so far. There are times that I'm like, why are we saying that to a large audience, right?
And so boundaries are also a very healthy piece to this.
And defining sacredness, I think. Like, what's sacred to you? Not to go too heavy, but like what boundaries, what are those sacred boundaries, or what are those boundaries that I know in advance I'm not going to cross or put out there?
Well, I was thinking about that, and sometimes there was a conversation that was occurring that sometimes when we're being vulnerable, sharing look back, but not necessarily real time in the moment.
Yes.
Because especially if we're involving other people, they may not want all of that in real time.
Right
so
now.
being vulnerable is a boundaried experience in and of itself.
I love that. I love that. Lastly, you want us to show up.
So in these examples, I've talked a lot about sharing.
Yeah.
Like we're going to share ourselves,
Yeah.
we're going to know and let people know, but sometimes it's not about sharing at all. It's showing up and letting another person share, letting them be vulnerable, being present for them and just holding that space. Just going to the party, even if you're nervous, but you just show up and you're there.
Yeah.
That's a really important piece.
That is an important piece of it. And I really appreciate how you've broken this down and given us a new angle to chew on and consider, Kristin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where can we go to find more from you?
Yeah, you can find me at thehealinggroup.com.
thehealinggroup.com. Plenty of great resources there. And thank you again for this insightful conversation. If you want to review today's conversation or find a link to the Healing Group, you can go to our website, studio5.ksl.com. We'd like to take a minute and remind you of the search engine in the upper right-hand corner of the screen as well. It's a great resource to search contributors by name or topics by keyword as well. So we hope that is a helpful resource for you as the holiday season particularly progresses.